The colony had always been a peaceful place, the kind of place where people woke up each morning feeling safe. It stood on the outer edge of known space, far from the crowded trade routes and far from the loudness of the larger worlds. Life there moved slowly. People grew their food, shared tools, fixed each other's homes, and took pride in every small improvement they made to the land. The colony wasn't filled with huge buildings or advanced machines. It was built with simple homes, long farming fields, and a strong belief that peace was still possible in a galaxy full of stronger powers. Families often said that the best part of living there was the silence. You could hear the wind moving over the grass, birds gliding over the rooftops, and children laughing as they ran between the houses. Many settlers had moved there because they wanted to escape the constant watch of the Galactic Empire. They wanted freedom from rules that changed too fast and from taxes that left people exhausted. Out here, far from everything, they thought the Empire would never care about them. For years, that belief held strong. The Empire's ships never came near. No officer ever visited. No warning was ever sent. People began to think their colony was small enough and distant enough to stay unnoticed forever. Parents told their children not to worry about the outside worlds. They said the Empire was too busy with its own battles and politics to even think about a quiet farming settlement. But things changed the day a sharp, distant hum filled the sky. At first, people thought it was just one of the colony transport ships returning from a supply trip. But when they looked up, they didn't see the familiar shape of a human craft. Instead, a massive Empire patrol ship hovered above the fields, slow and heavy, blocking out the sunlight like a floating shadow. People came out of their homes, confused and frightened. It wasn't normal for a ship that large to visit a place so small. The patrol ship had no reason to be there, and everyone knew it. Some people called their neighbors. Others gathered their families inside and shut the doors. The colony leader tried to calm everyone. He told them the Empire might only be checking coordinates or passing through. He reminded them that the colony had no weapons, no threat, nothing that could make the Empire suspicious. Everyone wanted to believe him. They had always believed the Empire would ignore them. But the ship descended lower, and the sound grew louder. Dust lifted into the air. Lights scanned across the fields. The Empire wasn't passing through. It was looking for something. Or someone. The patrol doors opened, and a group of Imperial officers stepped out. Their expressions were cold and distant, the kind of look that said they weren't there to talk. They weren't there for trade or diplomacy. The officers didn't greet anyone. They didn't introduce themselves. They simply began walking through the colony like it belonged to them. People stood back, unsure what to do. The colony had never dealt with the Empire directly. They had no rules for moments like this. They only had fear and the hope that if they stayed calm, nothing bad would happen. Among the people watching was a young child standing near the front of the crowd. The child wasn't afraid. They were curious, trying to understand why such serious-looking strangers had arrived. The officers didn't even notice the child at first. They were too focused on their scanners, their devices, and whatever mission they believed they were completing. One of the officers began questioning the colony leader with a demanding tone. He wanted records, maps, energy reports, and anything else that could prove the colony wasn't hiding something. The leader tried to answer politely. He explained that the colony was simple, peaceful, and had nothing of interest. But the officer barely listened. His eyes kept scanning the surroundings, as if he expected to find something dangerous. The tension kept rising. Some colonists stepped forward to defend their leader, but in a calm way, trying not to provoke anything. Others whispered to each other, wondering why the Empire was acting so aggressive toward harmless settlers. In the middle of this growing tension, the child stepped a little closer, trying to understand the argument. Children in the colony had grown up without seeing conflict. They didn't know how dangerous a misunderstanding with the Empire could be. They didn't sense the danger adults felt immediately. The officers were already frustrated. They believed the colony was lying or hiding something, simply because it was small, and their instruments weren't detecting what they expected. When one of the machines gave an unexpected reading, the officer reacted sharply. He made a sudden movement, not realizing the child was standing too close. It was a careless, reckless action, one that came from impatience and arrogance, not from intent. But it caused a moment that would change everything. The child stumbled and fell, and in that moment, the entire colony seemed to freeze. People rushed forward. Voices rose in panic and anger. The officers looked shocked, but not apologetic. They didn't take responsibility. They didn't step forward to help. They simply acted as if the situation wasn't their fault, and that reaction, cold, empty, and dismissive, hurt the colony more deeply than anything else. Adults picked up the child and surrounded them, trembling with fear and heartbreak. People cried out for answers, for accountability, for even a small expression of regret from the officers. But the Empire team only gave commands, telling the colonists to step back, to remain calm, to stop making things difficult. In that moment, something silent and powerful shifted inside the hearts of the colony's people. The Empire had always been distant, something they avoided by living far away. But now it had stepped into their lives, brought harm to one of their own, and shown no care at all. The officers quickly returned to their ship, uncomfortable with the colonists' rising anger. They lifted off without explanation, leaving behind a community changed forever. After the ship vanished into the clouds, the colony fell into a deep, painful silence. Parents held their children close. Neighbors gathered together, trying to understand how something so cruel could happen in a place that had always been peaceful. People walked around slowly, unsure how to comfort each other. It felt like the ground they trusted had been shaken. The colony leader tried to speak to the people, but his voice broke several times. He had believed the Empire would ignore them. He had believed their world was too small to attract trouble. Now he carried the weight of feeling that he had failed them, even though no one blamed him. As the day faded into evening, small groups sat together outside their homes. They talked in low voices about what the Empire had done, how unprovoked the whole encounter was, and what it meant for their future. Many wondered if more Empire ships would come. Others wondered why the Empire treated peaceful humans like a threat. But one thing became clear to everyone. The colony could no longer trust that distance alone would keep them safe. People began asking questions that no one wanted to answer. How do you protect a community that only wants peace? How do you stand up to a power so large it barely notices you? How do you keep children safe when the galaxy is ruled by fear? Later that night, when most homes had dimmed their lights, a small group of leaders met quietly in an old building near the center of the colony. Their faces were tired, their eyes swollen from hours of worry. They sat around a worn table, speaking in soft, serious voices. They weren't angry, they were grieving. But beneath the grief was a new determination. They realized that the colony could no longer pretend it lived outside the Empire's reach. They needed a plan, something stronger than hope, something that could protect every family, every child. And deep beneath the colony, far below the fields and homes, lay something people rarely mentioned. A hidden place, a secret older than most settlers. A place built for a time no one ever wanted to see again. The cryo chamber. It had been locked decades ago, sealed with the belief that humanity would never need its contents. It held the sleeping super soldiers from an earlier era-enhanced humans designed only for times when ordinary people could not defend themselves. For years, the colony avoided even talking about them. But now, with the memory of the child's tragedy hanging over them, the leaders understood something painful but necessary. The time they feared had finally come, and the decision ahead would change their destiny forever. After the Imperial ship disappeared into the sky, the colony felt colder than ever before. People moved around quietly the next morning, as if their voices had lost their strength. No one wanted to talk about what happened, but everyone carried the same weight inside their hearts. Even the sunlight seemed weaker, almost like the world itself was grieving with them. Parents kept their children indoors. Farmers paused their work in the fields. Mechanics closed their workshops early. The once lively colony looked like it was holding its breath. Unsure what the next moment might bring, the colony leader tried to go from house to house, speaking to families, offering support, reminding them they were not alone. But his own eyes told a different truth. He was shaken. He had trusted the idea that their distance from the Empire would keep them safe. Now he knew that distance meant nothing when the Empire wanted something. That evening, as the colony settled into a heavy silence, the leader called for a small meeting. Only a handful of trusted adults gathered, all of them tired, all of them still trying to process the previous day. They sat around a wooden table in an old storage hall, a place chosen because it was quiet and familiar. No one spoke for a long time. They just looked at each other, waiting for someone else to begin. Finally, the leader took a deep breath and said what everyone already feared. "We cannot pretend everything is fine," he said softly. "The Empire came once. They can come again. And next time, we might not be able to stop anything." His voice trembled on the last sentence, and no one blamed him. The truth was simply too heavy. A woman sitting near him rubbed her hands together anxiously. "What do we do? We don't have soldiers. We don't have weapons. We don't even have defense walls. This colony was built for peace, not for war." Another man added, "We can't leave. This is our home. Our crops, our water system, our entire life is here. We can't just abandon everything because the Empire decided to look our way." Someone else spoke up. "We could try negotiating with them. Send a message. Explain the situation." The leader shook his head immediately. They didn't listen yesterday. They didn't ask questions. They didn't care. If they return, it won't be to apologize. It will be because they think we're hiding something. A quiet sadness filled the room. They all knew the Empire had grown distant, strict, unpredictable over the years. The Empire didn't see small human settlements as people. They saw them as resources, statistics, and coordinates on a map. For a long time after that, no one said anything. But the silence wasn't empty. It was the kind that appears right before a difficult decision. Finally, an older member of the council leaned forward. His voice was slow, careful, almost fearful of the words he was about to say. "There is one thing, but none of us ever wanted to use it." Everyone knew what he meant. The leader closed his eyes for a moment, as if the thought alone weighed him down. The cryo chamber, that hidden vault beneath the colony, was created many years ago. Back during a different era, when humanity faced threats they couldn't fight with normal people. Super soldiers had been designed and enhanced for battles too dangerous for ordinary humans. When the war ended, the world made a promise to itself. These soldiers would never be awakened unless there was absolutely no other choice. For decades, that chamber had remained untouched. Some younger colonists didn't even know it existed. The older ones avoided mentioning it because the very idea of those soldiers waking up again felt like summoning a past everyone wanted to forget. Now, the older man's words made the room fall completely still. The leader spoke softly. "Are we really at that point?" The man nodded. "We may be. Yesterday proved that we are not safe. And if the Empire returns with orders, not mistakes, we will have nothing to protect us." Someone else disagreed quickly, shaking their head. "But waking them, isn't that dangerous for us too?" They come from a different time. They were made for fighting. What if they don't understand our ways? What if they bring more problems than solutions? Another person added, and what will we tell the rest of the colony? How do we explain bringing back warriors who were frozen because the world feared what war could make us become? The room filled with worried voices. Some argued that awakening the soldiers was the only smart choice. Others felt it was too extreme, too risky, too close to repeating history. Every voice spoke with emotion, because every person wanted the same thing. They just didn't agree on how to protect it. The leader listened to everyone, his hands clasped tightly together. He didn't want to reopen a chapter of human history that was better left untouched. He didn't want to rely on enhanced soldiers to keep his people safe. He didn't want fear to become their new future. But he also couldn't ignore the truth. The Empire had already caused harm once. And the Empire rarely changed its ways after one incident. Hours passed. The Council discussed every possibility they could think of: building shields, sending messages, hiding deeper in the valley, even relocating the colony. But every idea had the same problem. They didn't have enough time. They didn't have enough resources. And the Empire was simply too big, too unpredictable. Finally, the leader stood up. His voice was quiet, but steady. "We didn't choose this," he said. "We didn't provoke anyone. We have lived here in peace for years. But yesterday showed that the Empire sees us as nothing more than a place to search, a place to demand answers, a place they can walk through without care." He looked at each person around the room. "We cannot stop them with words. We cannot stop them with farming tools or homemade shields. But we can stop them with the truth, by showing them that humans are not weak, that we will defend ourselves, that we are not alone." His final words were clear, heavy, and impossible to ignore. It is time to open the cryo chamber. No one spoke. No one protested. Everyone understood what the leader meant and why he had no choice. The decision was not made out of anger. It was made out of responsibility. The colony didn't want war. The colony didn't want conflict. The colony didn't even want power. All they wanted was safety. Safety for their families. Safety for their children. Safety for their future. When the meeting ended, the members left the building quietly. Some walked home with a deep sense of fear. Others walked with a sense of purpose. But none of them walked with doubt. That night, the leader stayed awake long after everyone else had gone to bed. He stood outside, looking up at the stars. The sky was clear, wide, and endlessly peaceful, so different from the Empire that traveled through it. He wondered what the super soldiers would think when they woke up. Would they be confused? Angry? Tired of fighting? Would they even want to help a colony that had been built on the hope of escaping the past? He had no answers, but he did know this. If they didn't awaken them, the colony might not survive the next imperial visit. The next morning, the council gathered again, this time in a smaller group. They planned how to prepare the chamber, how to access it after so many years, how to explain their decision to the people, and how to make sure the awakening was safe. They agreed they would do it quietly at first. They didn't want to scare the colony. They didn't want rumors spreading too fast. They wanted to be absolutely sure before telling everyone. The leader decided to personally oversee the preparations. He visited the underground entrance, a sealed metal door hidden beneath a storage shed. Dust had gathered over the years, and vines had grown around the edges, as if nature itself wanted to keep the past buried. When he touched the door, a cold shiver traveled through his hand. It felt like touching time that had been paused, waiting for a moment like this. Technicians came to inspect the old systems. They checked the power lines, the backup generators, and the control panels. Everything was old, outdated, and delicate. They had to move slowly, carefully, making sure nothing damaged the systems they needed. As the work continued, the leader couldn't stop thinking about the children in the colony. Every laugh, every small footstep, every smile reminded him why this decision mattered. He didn't want those children to grow up in fear. He didn't want them to learn how dangerous the galaxy could be before they learned how beautiful it was. The colony deserved peace. True peace. And if awakening the super soldiers was the only way to protect that peace, then he would accept the responsibility. Over the next few days, the council quietly prepared the chamber for activation. They checked nutrition tanks, stabilizers, and communication systems. They made sure every part of the awakening process would be safe and controlled. Finally, after days of silent preparation, the leader gathered the council one more time. "We are ready," the technician said. The room grew still. It felt like the moment before a storm, not a storm of destruction, but a storm of change. The leader closed his eyes for a brief moment and exhaled slowly. "Then tomorrow, we begin." The decision had been made. The path had been chosen. And although no one knew what awaited them, they all understood one thing: the colony would never be the same again. The morning the awakening was scheduled, the entire colony felt different. Even those who didn't know the full truth sensed that something unusual was happening underground. People noticed council members walking quickly with tense expressions. They saw technicians carrying old equipment that hadn't been used in years. They felt the air heavy with quiet worry. No one said anything out loud, but everyone felt it. The leader woke before sunrise. He didn't sleep much the night before. He spent most of the dark hours walking around the colony, checking the homes, the farms, the community hall, and the school. It was as if he wanted to remind himself exactly what he was protecting and exactly what he might be risking. Every candle flickering in a window, every soft sound of a child sleeping, every small detail that made the colony feel alive gave him strength to face what was coming. By the time the sun was just touching the horizon, the council members gathered near the old storage shed that hid the underground entrance. They were quieter than usual, but focused. The shed doors had been opened, and sunlight fell down onto the metal panel covering the stairway below. It had taken effort to clear the area, but the path was now visible for the first time in many years. One of the technicians entered the access code and placed his hand on the scanner. A deep mechanical sound echoed below as the old locks disengaged. Dust fell from the door as it slid open slowly, revealing a long, dim stairway. A cold gust of air drifted upward, carrying the smell of machinery that had been untouched for decades. The leader stood at the top of the stairs for a moment. He knew that once he walked down, there would be no turning back. The colony's future would shift permanently. Still, he stepped forward, gripping the handrail as he led the group inside. The stairway was narrow and deep. Their footsteps echoed softly. Lights along the walls flickered weakly, struggling to wake after many silent years. Some bulbs stayed dark, but others glowed enough to guide them down. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and the sound of distant machines humming grew louder. Finally, they reached a heavy door at the bottom of the stairway. The technician tapped at a rusty keypad, adjusting the old wires manually. After a few tense attempts, the door unlocked with a long metallic clank. Inside was the cryo chamber. It was a massive underground hall, larger than most people in the colony even realized existed beneath their feet. The ceiling was high, with thick pipes running across it like veins. Faint blue lights illuminated the room. Rows of cryopods were arranged along both sides, each one sealed with frost-covered glass. These pods held the super soldiers' humans, who had been asleep longer than most colonists had been alive. The soldiers inside didn't look frightening. Even through the glass, they appeared calm, frozen in peaceful silence. Their uniforms were outdated, their equipment covered in dust, and their names erased by time. They weren't monsters. They were human beings, built for difficult times, preserved in hopes that they would never be needed again. The leader approached the first pod. He felt a mix of awe and sadness. These people had given their lives to a war that ended long ago, then were put into sleep with the promise that their sacrifice would save future generations. Now those future generations needed them again. The technicians walked around the pods one by one, checking cables, power lines, and cooling systems. Some machines made dull beeping sounds. Others powered up with a soft hum. The lights grew brighter as the room awakened along with its purpose. One technician spoke quietly. Everything seems stable. We can begin the warm-up sequence. The leader swallowed hard. Start it. The technician pressed a series of buttons on a central console. A low vibration traveled through the floor as the ancient systems activated. Screens lit up with old data, showing heart rates frozen in time, brain activity held in suspension, and body temperatures slowly rising by fractions of a degree. The awakening process would take hours, maybe the whole day. The soldiers couldn't simply be switched on. Their bodies needed time to adjust, to warm, to remember. The leader asked everyone to remain calm and patient. This wasn't something anyone wanted rushed. While the machines worked, the council sat together in a corner of the chamber. They watched as fog melted from the glass of the pods. They listened to the quiet hum of the machines. They spoke in soft voices, sharing their worries and hopes. One council member voiced what many felt. When they wake up, they'll want answers. They'll ask why this colony needs them. They'll ask what brought us to this point. The leader nodded. And we'll tell them the truth. All of it. They deserve honesty. Another member asked, "Do you think they'll be angry? Or confused?" "Probably both," the leader said softly. But they were trained not just for strength. They were trained for discipline, for strategy, for protection. They were leaders once. They won't turn against the people they're meant to protect. Still, no one could predict how someone who had been asleep for so long would react to a world that had moved on without them. Time passed slowly. The lights inside the pods grew warmer. The frost on the glass faded little by little, revealing clearer shapes inside. The soldiers' bodies shifted slightly as their muscles loosened. Their breathing, once silent, began to show gentle movement. Their fingers twitched. Their eyes, still closed, flickered beneath the lids. It felt like watching history wake up. The council members stood up, gathering around as excitement and fear mixed in the air. No one spoke, afraid their voices might break the fragile calm. The leader stepped forward, standing nearest to the pod that was activating the fastest. A soft alarm beeped on the console. One pod unlocked. Steam drifted out in a white cloud as the glass door opened slowly. The soldier inside lay still for a moment, breathing slowly, as if trying to remember the meaning of movement. Then, with great effort, the soldier opened their eyes. The leader felt something tighten in his chest. The soldier's eyes were sharp but confused, full of questions that couldn't be answered in a single moment. The soldier looked around the chamber, then down at their own hands. As if recognizing life again, the soldier tried to sit up. The leader stepped forward gently, offering support without speaking too loudly. The soldier held his arm, steadying themselves. Their voice came out rough, almost unused. "How long has it been?" The leader answered slowly. "A long time. Longer than anyone expected." The soldier looked around, studying the faces of the council. There was no fear in their expression, just determination, mixed with a quiet sadness, as if they already sensed what had brought them back. "Why am I awake?" The leader paused. This question carried the weight of everything the colony had endured, everything they were trying to prevent, everything they hoped to protect. He spoke honestly, choosing simple words, because we need help. The soldier watched him carefully, waiting. There was an incident, the leader continued. The Empire arrived without warning. They caused harm, and they may come back. We have no defense. We have no army. We have families, children, and peaceful people who cannot stand against something that big. The soldiers' eyes softened, but their posture straightened. And you want us to protect them? Yes, the leader said quietly. We don't want a war. We don't want anyone hurt. We just want to keep our people safe. You were created for times like this. Times when ordinary families cannot defend themselves. The soldier didn't answer immediately. Instead, they looked around once more at the other pods, at the council, at the cold chamber that had been their home for decades. They touched the frost melting on the pod door, then finally nodded. We'll help, the soldier said simply. That single promise lifted a weight off everyone's shoulders. One by one, more pods began to unlock. More soldiers opened their eyes, breathed fresh air, and stepped into a world that had forgotten them, but now needed them again. Some staggered, some stood straight immediately, but all shared the same quiet resolve when they learned why they were awakened throughout the day. The chamber slowly filled with life voices, footsteps, questions, and memories returning like slow waves. The soldiers listened carefully to every explanation. They didn't shout, didn't panic, didn't show anger. Their discipline was still sharp. Even after years of sleep, by evening, the leader brought them above ground. The soldiers stepped out into the sunlight with awe. They watched children playing at a distance, farmers walking home, the warm glow of lamps inside homes. They stood quietly, realizing this peaceful world was the reason they had been brought back. The leader whispered, "This is what we're trying to protect." The soldiers nodded slowly. Their expressions were serious, but their eyes were gentle. They understood perfectly. And without needing to be asked again, they agreed to stand with the colony not as weapons, not as tools, but as guardians. Their awakening marked the start of a new chapter. A chapter where humanity would no longer face the galaxy alone. Starts at the moment when the fleet, the super soldiers, and the entire human side stand on the edge of a turning point. The anger of the past is still there, but now it has changed into something more controlled, something sharper, something with purpose. People are no longer talking about fear or revenge. They are talking about responsibility, clarity, and protecting their own future. The moment the fleet entered the outer ring of the Empire's territory, everything changed. Human ships were not hiding anymore. They were shining like bright arrows in a dark sky. Every monitor on every deck showed the same thing: the path ahead, the last deep space passage that led straight toward the Empire's main command. For years, the Empire had believed humans would never dare come this far. Now humans had come farther than anyone expected. Inside the flagship, the air felt heavier. Everyone was doing their job quietly, but with clear focus. People moved from screen to screen, some adjusting communication links, others checking the stability of the cryo pods, even though the super soldiers were already awake and moving around. They were fully alert now. Their energy, their calmness, their discipline made everyone else stand straighter. Even without saying much, the super soldiers filled the room with quiet strength. The first of them, the one who always carried himself like a calm mountain, walked slowly across the observation deck. His steps didn't make sound, but his presence made the whole room pay attention. He stood near the large glass wall that showed the stars passing by and said something very simple: "We move with clarity. No chaos." Even though he spoke quietly, the words traveled through every corner of the command deck. People nodded, some without even noticing they were doing it. He wasn't giving orders. He was simply setting the tone for what was ahead. The communication officer announced that the Outer Imperial patrols had detected the human fleet. Scanners showed movement small ships gathering, forming their defensive patterns. The Empire expected fear, or at least hesitation. But the human fleet didn't slow down. What surprised the Emperor's commanders even more was that humans didn't send a warning message or a threat. They simply locked into formation and kept moving forward. Their silence itself became the warning. The Empire suddenly realized that humans had changed. They were not the same quiet people who kept to their own planets. They were a force now, a coordinated one dot as the fleets moved closer. The Empire activated thousands of security lights and signals along its border stations. Red beams scanned the darkness. Drones shifted into new positions. Fighters gathered in clusters. It looked like a giant metallic storm preparing to release its full strength. Even in that tense moment, the humans didn't lose their calm rhythm. The super soldiers stood in the center of the flagship command deck like pillars of control. Some rested their hands behind their back. Others studied the screens showing enemy formations, but none looked stressed. They had been trained for this exact kind of environment. For them, clarity mattered more than speed, and discipline mattered more than noise. When the first Imperial broadcast came through, it was filled with formal language and confident tone. Their commander demanded that the human fleet turn back, stating that the Empire wanted stability and that humans were risking unnecessary conflict. People on the bridge looked at each other with disbelief. It was strange how calmly the Empire tried to make themselves sound like the victims. The super soldier leader finally turned from the observation window and faced the communication table. But he didn't speak. He just nodded to the Admiral, silently giving approval to reply with honesty, not threat. The human Admiral stepped forward and spoke slowly, choosing steady words. Your Empire harmed one of our youngest. We won't let that pass silently. We are not here to destroy. We are here to end the pattern. Everyone in the room could feel the weight behind those words. They weren't shouted. They weren't decorated with anger. They were direct, and truth has its own kind of strength. The Empire's response came back almost instantly. Their tone shifted. It was still formal, but now one could hear tension behind every sentence. They said humans misunderstood the situation, that it was an accident, that the incident wasn't done with intention. Everyone in the human fleet listened carefully, but the apology felt like a weak shield covering a larger problem. People knew the Empire rarely admitted anything unless they felt cornered that the super soldiers didn't react with emotion. Instead, they focused on what mattered, moving forward with clarity. The Admiral ordered the next step prepare the communication drones that would carry a complete history file of the child's incident, the Empire's past actions, and a timeline of human restraint. They wanted the truth saved and shared, not hidden or twisted. They wanted the Empire to face the reality they had ignored for too long. As the fleet moved deeper into enemy space, everyone expected a full battle to break out at any moment. But something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, the Empire's smaller ships slowly shifted aside, opening a narrow path. It was shocking. For decades, those ships had never moved for anyone. Now they were moving for humans. The younger crew members whispered among themselves. Was the Empire afraid? Was this a trap? Or was the Empire finally understanding the seriousness of what they had done? The human Admiral asked the super soldier leader what he thought. He replied in the same calm tone he always used. They fear responsibility more than conflict. That is why they step aside. His words settled inside the room like a quiet truth. The Empire wasn't stepping aside because they respected humans. They were stepping aside because they didn't want to face the consequences. The fleet continued forward. Every kilometer felt heavier. Ahead of them lay the Empire's central station, a massive structure with shining towers and long metallic rings that wrapped around each other like a giant machine. It had always been a symbol of power. But that day, as the human fleet approached, the station seemed less confident, more like something trying to hide its own fear behind bright lights. Back on the flagship, the crew prepared for the moment when communication with the Emperor himself would open. They knew he wouldn't accept fault easily. He would speak with pride, try to twist the story, or try to pressure them into backing down. That was his style. The super soldiers gathered near the center of the room and closed their eyes for a moment, as if syncing their breathing. They didn't need speeches or motivation. They were simply aligning themselves, calming their minds, preparing for anything. Seeing them so centered made the rest of the crew stand straighter, breathe deeper, and feel more balanced. The engines of the fleet slowed as they reached the point where the Empire's central defense zone began. It felt like the whole galaxy was holding its breath. Even the stars outside seemed frozen for a moment. And then, the Imperial call opened. A large hologram flickered to life at the center of the deck, showing the Emperor a tall figure dressed in heavy ceremonial robes. His expression was sharp, confident, but there was a slight stiffness around his eyes. He greeted the humans, not warmly, not aggressively, but with a careful tone that revealed he didn't know whether to act strong or cautious. The human admiral answered calmly, introducing the purpose of the fleet and the reason they had come this far. The Emperor tried to shift the blame, tried to present the incident as a misunderstanding caused by rogue forces. But every person on the deck could hear the cracks forming in his explanation. It wasn't honest. It was an attempt to escape responsibility. Before the Emperor could finish, the super soldier leader stepped forward, not aggressively, not with intimidation, but with a steady presence that demanded truth. He spoke only one sentence. "We are here because your Empire forgot that even the smallest life deserves safety." The Emperor froze. For a moment, he didn't know how to reply. No threat had been made. No anger had been shown. Just a calm, direct reminder of what was right. That single sentence changed the entire atmosphere of the conversation. The Emperor suddenly realized that humans were not acting out of rage. They were acting out of principle. And that was far more powerful. Part 4 ends here, right on the edge of the final confrontation, where truth, responsibility, and the future of both sides will be decided. Right after the super soldier leader spoke those powerful, quiet words that cut through the Emperor's pride like a beam of light, the entire command deck on the human flagship stayed silent, waiting to see how the Emperor would respond. Even the machines around them hummed more softly, as if the moment itself demanded respect. For a long few seconds, the Emperor didn't speak. His face showed a mix of confusion, tension, and something he wasn't used to, being challenged by someone who didn't fear him or want anything from him. Humans weren't asking for land, resources, or control. They were asking for truth. That alone shook him. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice didn't carry the same confidence as before. He tried to hold on to his power, but his tone had changed. He said the Empire regretted what happened, that the officials involved had acted without permission, and that he would personally oversee a full investigation. It sounded like an apology, but at the same time, it felt like a shield used to protect his dignity instead of addressing the real wound in the human command center. People exchanged quiet looks. Some felt a little relief, some felt doubtful, and some felt the Emperor was simply trying to escape responsibility again. The Admiral listened carefully, waiting for the right moment. The super soldiers did not move. They stood perfectly calm, watching the Emperor with eyes that held no anger, only pure clarity. That calmness itself made the Emperor uneasy. The Admiral finally spoke. He did not raise his voice or act emotional. He said they did not come for excuses or half-truths. They came because they wanted to make sure the Empire understood the cost of harming even one innocent human. He explained that humans had always stayed peaceful, avoiding conflict even when pushed. But now things had changed. Human unity had grown. Their strength had awakened. And their patience with injustice had ended. The emperor tried to interrupt. But the admiral continued firmly, saying this wasn't a threat, but a reminder. Humans would not stay silent anymore. A long silence followed. Then, something unexpected happened. The emperor asked to speak privately with the super soldier leader. The crew exchanged surprised glances. Nobody had ever seen the emperor request something private during an open crisis. The admiral hesitated for a moment, but the leader nodded calmly. Showing he was ready, the hologram shifted slightly, and the conversation moved into a secure channel, where only the leader and the emperor could hear Dot inside that quiet space. The emperor removed his ceremonial robe's outer layer, as if dropping his public mask. He asked the leader a simple but heavy question. Why do your people care so deeply about one child? The leader answered without delay. Because life is not measured by size or age. A world that ignores the smallest life is a world on the edge of losing its soul. Those words hit the emperor, harder than any weapon. For a moment, he turned his gaze downward. Something in his expression softened. Maybe he remembered something from his own past. Maybe a memory he had buried under layers of authority and ambition. After a pause, the emperor asked what the humans truly wanted. The leader answered with equal honesty. They wanted an end to the empire's habit of acting above accountability. They wanted assurance that humans would never again be treated as lesser beings. And they wanted recognition, not admiration or fear, just recognition that humans were equals. The emperor didn't reply immediately. He walked a few steps away inside the hologram window, deep in thought. When he returned, his voice had changed. It was slower, almost tired. He said he understood, and he admitted something he would never say publicly, that the empire had grown too proud, too distant from truth. That mistakes had been hidden for years because no one wanted to challenge the structure. Hearing this, the leader didn't show satisfaction or triumph. He simply nodded at the emperor, then asked a final question. If I acknowledge everything before my council and the galaxy, will your people stand down? The leader looked at him with steady honesty. We came here for clarity, not destruction. Show the truth, make it known, protect the weak within your own borders, and humans will step back. The private channel ended. The entire fleet waited for the leader to speak. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then he turned to the admiral and said, he has agreed to speak before his own council. Everyone felt the shift instantly. The air eased. The tension loosened. People who had been gripping controls for hours finally relaxed their shoulders. Even though the situation wasn't over yet, something important had changed. The Emperor's hologram reappeared, this time connected to the Empire's central council chamber. Hundreds of Imperial leaders sat in rows, and thousands more watched through their systems across their worlds. The Emperor raised his hand to quiet the chamber. Then he did what few expected. He spoke the truth. He told the entire council that the Empire had mistreated humans in the past. He explained that the incident with the child had been caused by reckless officers who believed humans were too weak to respond. He called it a failure in leadership, a failure in judgment, and a failure of values. The chamber rippled with shock. Some leaders argued, some froze, some lowered their eyes. But for the first time in years, the Emperor did not hide behind pride. The human crew watched everything unfold through the broadcast. They could see the Empire shaking internally, finally confronting its own mistakes. They knew this moment would go down in history, not because of conflict, but because of honesty. After the Emperor finished, he turned toward the hologram that connected the room to the human flagship. He declared that humans would be recognized officially as an equal civilization. He announced new agreements, strict rules preventing any harm or discrimination toward humans. and the creation of a cross-galactic council where humans would hold full voting rights. The human fleet remained silent, not out of doubt, but out of emotional weight. The moment was unbelievably huge. It wasn't victory through battle. It was victory through truth and unity. On the flagship, people finally breathed out. Some had tears in their eyes, thinking of the child whose memory had brought them this far. The super soldiers closed their eyes briefly, as if honoring the life that had awakened their strength. The admiral signaled the fleet to lower defensive shields. All ships turned their engines to a calm mode. It was their way of saying they accepted the Emperor's decision. The Emperor's guards lowered their weapons. Even the lights in the council chamber dimmed into a peaceful tone. Slowly, the tension between two civilizations dissolved. The human fleet prepared to return home. As they turned away from the Empire's central station, the stars outside felt brighter, the path ahead clearer. People felt proud not because they had shown power, but because they had defended dignity. The super soldier leader stood once more near the observation window. One of the younger officers asked him quietly if the mission was truly over. He replied with a gentle firmness, "When truth rises, missions end." As the ships traveled back through the silent ocean of space, every person on board felt something change inside them. They had faced the Empire, not with anger, but with courage and unity. They had protected the value of a single child's life. And they had shown the galaxy who humans truly were, not weak, not silent, but clear, united, and unshakable. And that is how Part 5 ends, on a quiet, powerful note that shows how strength is not always in weapons, but sometimes in truth, responsibility, and standing up for what is right.